Hey, what's up, everybody? Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and ways that we as men can give life to others. This is episode 2 of season 4, and I am so grateful that you're tuning in today. Joining me for this episode is a friend of mine named Ross Reitsma. Ross is a husband to Crystal, a father to 2 awesome kids, McKinley and Bennett, a follower of Christ, a motivational speaker, and a financial advisor for Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management Company. In addition to all of that, Ross also serves on the board for the Kingdom Capital Fund and is the chair for the God is CEO initiative, a movement for managers, business owners, and those that seek to be a Christian influence in their workplace. On today's show, Ross and I talk about what it means to make God our CEO, and it's some simple things that we can all do in our effort to live out our faith, at work, at home, and in the community. We also visit about why John 3:30 is a verse that he's seeking to focus on each day, and how a conversation he had with a friend years ago changed the trajectory of his marriage and how he lives his life. I have no doubt that this is going to be a very fruitful episode. So here's my conversation with Ross Wright. Ross, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Tom.
Yeah, dude.
Honor, privilege. Just really appreciate you and the work you're doing.
Yeah, well, this will be a great conversation, and I'm appreciative of you taking some time out of your very busy schedule. I know that things have just been kind of crazy at home and work, and just with fundraising efforts, and then you just got done. We're recording this now here at the front end of summer, even though it's going to air or kind of be dropped in the fall, but you just got done this past weekend doing a football camp with CJ from the Vikes, and so you're very busy right now. So I really appreciate you taking some time.
It's all good. Love the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so we're going to get right into the conversation, but before we do that, this is going to be a little introduction to who you are to a lot of listeners. And so I'd love for you just to kind of introduce yourself, tell a little about your family, what you do, and then we're going to get into it.
Yeah. So married to my awesome wife, Crystal. We will be married 19 years.
Okay.
18 years.
Let's get that right.
18 years as of July.
Okay.
Been together 20, and both grew up in Southwest Minnesota. And we got 2 awesome kids, Bennett and McKinley. McKinley will be a freshman at Sioux Falls Christian. Bennett will be in 6th grade at Sioux Falls Christian. So they are my main driving force, and just we're very blessed. It's just abundant. We've been blessed a lot just as a family. We have a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
And, been blessed to be in business now 19 years with Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management. I have a partner, Mark Wise, in Indianapolis. And we've consistently grown our firm collectively and collaboratively. And just working with our clients. COVID was a unique experience because it actually broke down more barriers than we ever would have thought in our business. But aside from that, I spend our time charitably. We like to get very involved, and so blessed, privileged to be served on Kingdom Capital Board and chair the God is CEO initiative, but then also very near and dear, our family gets to do it collectively together. Crystal and I serve on Compassion Child Care Board, so we're very passionate about that. And so, yeah, it has been a busy coming off the golf tournament, VIP dinner event, and then headed into CJ's camp, and then the God is CEO event coming up this week.
Yeah. So, well, this is it's great to be able to have what I think is going to be a very meaningful conversation because. You and I recently, we haven't even been connected that long, right? I mean, we've known so many of the same people.
Correct.
And so we had heard about one another a lot. Mm-hmm. And then we were finally able to connect earlier this past year and then sit down for lunch several weeks ago. And just our conversation that we had over lunch, I just really felt like that the Lord said, hey, you need to have some of that conversation, bring that to for other people to hear, because God has done just a tremendous work in your life, and he's using your life now in such cool ways. And so I really want to start our time together in talking about just your faith journey and just your walk with Jesus, and just when did that start, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so grew up Southwest Minnesota, blessed with 2 great parents who were foundational in faith, grandparents both foundational in faith. grew up in a Christian Reformed church, and going to church twice a Sunday. You're in cadets, you're in youth group, and my parents were rock solid in their faith, and so being able to bring that to the forefront, owned it early in my life. But there's a difference between owning it and living it. And as life moves forward, I went to a small Christian school, Chandler Christian, graduated with 5 kids in my 8th grade class.
Okay.
And went on to Southwest Christian, a Christian high school in Edgerton, Minnesota. And we graduated with 40 kids in our class, and then went on to the University of Sioux Falls. I was there to go play basketball. I wasn't there to go to school. God had different plans.
Yeah.
And 3 surgeries in my first 2 years. At the same time, coming out of the surgery, discovered the internship with Northwestern Mutual. And at the same time, had met my wife prior to all of that really going down. And where God closes one door, he opens multiple other doors. And the business, career took off, and it was an awesome blessing, but also an incredible learning curve. First and foremost, spiritually, and understanding, Jordan Montgomery, my close friend and coach, him and I are very aligned in our faith values. We talk all the time about growth over goals. And I was always very goal oriented, and made this world way too much about me. Being a successful athlete by whatever measure of standards people might put out there in younger years, high school, being able to go play college basketball, kind of made it about me. Right.
So would you say at that season of your life, like when you came into the college years, Ross, that your identity was really sports?
Yeah, 100%.
So you had the faith foundation, and God was there, but yet wasn't necessarily your focus, and it was really about you on a basketball court.
Yeah, it was 100%. Like, I was a very competitive individual and had goals to just aspire in that area. And I just envisioned myself in this phenomenal college basketball career, right? Came off, a great high school career, and transition into college. And then you end up having 3 surgeries in the first 2 years, and realize that there's guys behind you who are more successful or more talented. And God's just saying, hey, this is not who you are. And it was hard. It's bitter, right? And he's teed that up, when you look back, right, and you just see how God was working in your life and the things and the people that he was putting in your life, the circumstances, situations to where you grow to today. I look back and I'm like, this is just all God's blessing. It's all his plan. Even though at that time I was really angry and frustrated because I'm like, this is who I am, right? And then you fast forward, graduated in 2007 from USF, having had a gap here and there due to some surgery and a significant surgery. It just put things in really good perspective, and then shifted the focus to becoming a married man. And I remember walking in and telling my coach, hey, I'm done. I couldn't recover. I'd had a major surgery in Mayo, and I couldn't recover, and I just felt my recovery wasn't as strong and good. And I said, hey, I found a career that I'm really passionate about, and I'm going to continue to pursue, and I found the woman of my dreams. And I remember him saying, hey, if every senior, at this time I'm a sophomore, he's like, if every senior graduating could tell me those same things, he said, I would have done my job as a leader of this team. So that meant a lot, but it still didn't fill the void of my competitive love for sports. But then God opened up other doors, and I started an AAU basketball program that I ran for 10 years, and my brother now runs, and began coaching youth in many other areas, and that began to fill some of that competitive void. But I still was seeking for goals, and I was seeking to glorify Ross's agenda. Even though going to church all the time, just faith has always been a part of our journey, and always been surrounded by incredible mentors throughout my life. But it just was a journey that I had to mature a lot. And still continue maturing in the faith.
Yeah, we're always maturing. We never stop learning. We're always seeking growth. So at what point would you say, like, okay, you realized that it's really about, like, it's about you. Like, you realized that that's how you were living your life. And that your faith was, again, a foundation, and it's not like it wasn't there, but it really was just definitely not your focus. Was there a point that you say, boy, this is something that took place that made you realize that?
Yeah. In our business, I'm self-employed. and it's a production-driven business, and there's just industry benchmarks and things like that. And when I go back, it's almost nauseating. We go back and look at business goals and things that I had and laid out, and I mean, laying out so many personal, professional, goals. It was all earthly things, and it was all about deflecting. I'm going to say, look at me, praise to me, like, hey, I want to be recognized for this, I want to be recognized for this. And it was all these just different benchmarks and standards that were non-significant to our Creator and not significant to the way Jesus would lead his life. And it was in 2012, I had an awesome mentor, Rick Diener, who after a business plan presentation had pulled me aside and said, hey, I love what you're doing. You're very successful at a young age. You've done a great job. And Rick had been in the business 25 years longer than me, just somebody who I always respected. And he had the courage to tell me what I needed to hear. And it was heartbreaking. And he basically, told me that the way I see myself and the way others see me, we're not the same person. And, at the same time, I had a couple other mentors in my life that had also helped bring that out and identify that to me. But, Rick was the one that said a statement that sent me home crying for 2 days and asking my wife for forgiveness of realizing that I am so selfish and that I was just focused on my goals. I was focused on, what can I do to just gain more status, influence. It was not about serving others. It wasn't about, building kingdom-minded goals, building a kingdom-focused business. It was about me. And that was some of the hardest things. And it took me on a journey from the end of 2011 through where we are today that has been incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. And one of my other mentors, he said, Ross, he goes, I noticed when your heart, your attitude, and your focus began to change is when I seen your business really take off. And that was God. Really working in my life and saying, hey, if you're going to consistently be focused on you, you're going to miss the mark. And it's going to leave me empty. It's going to leave me frustrated. It's going to leave me always wanting to get to the next level of some earthly measurement of a goal. And that was a journey, and went through some hard times throughout that journey of still wrestling with this. Who am I? What direction should I go?
That's such a hard thing to think about, Ross, because God wired us in a certain way, right? I mean, he wired you as a competitive person and someone that's going to pursue, and goals are not bad. I mean, right. Goals are not bad. Trying to live and work and be excellent, they're not bad things. But if they, in essence, become the thing, if they become our God, then it's out of balance. And it becomes problematic. And so that mind shift is not an easy one to just go through, because you still need to accomplish goals. I mean, you still want to be excellent. It's just you're doing it for a different purpose now.
100%. Goes 2012 was a great year business-wise. 2013 was a great year business-wise. 2014 and 2015, we had some really good challenges. And that's where I had to make some hard choices that if we're going to build this firm with what I believe the capacity is of what we want to do and the way we want to serve, God literally broke me on my knees. And I remember just praying God, if this is really what you want for me, open the door. And if it isn't, just send me a different direction. And I literally prayed a lot. And I went through a Bible study series, Craig Hill's God's Principles of Finance. And it was life transforming from a standpoint of my perspective of our money and a perspective of how stewardship needs to act. And there's just been some mainstay mentors throughout my life with Bruce Ogstead, who's now on my team, who you met, and Kurt and Ken Huskin and my own dad, who have just consistently walked with me the same time that I've had phenomenal business mentors who were patient enough to consistently keep me between the lines and guide me along the way. That growth journey, had some really, really hard, challenging moments, but it becomes one of those things of when you shift your mindset from a benchmark of measurement around, do I have enough? Am I accomplishing my goals? And we're still very goal-driven within the business, but it has different goals. And every goal needs to be measurable and accountable, but they're not about recognition all the time, right? They're not about, we need to get to this certain level to be seen, to be heard, to be noticed. It's more about, how are we going to lead? How are we going to love? How are we going to give? And how are we going to serve? And changing to an abundance mentality and a service-minded mentality of seeking to serve, promote, connect other people, ultimately for the kingdom, was one of the hardest shifts, and still something that my pride, I mean, I told you this coming on here.
Yeah.
John 3:30 is my verse that I'm consistently focused on, is, I must become less so he can become greater. And that's ultimately just making sure that I don't let that pride get in the way of my relationship with Christ. And that my pride doesn't trump what we're doing from a service standpoint. And that I don't make it about me.
Yeah.
And that is something that I really pray for all the time, is restricting and suppressing that pride, that arrogance, and making sure that I'm consistently serving Christ. And how would Christ respond to things? How would he lead his company? How would he serve his community? How would he serve God as CEO? How would he serve Compassion Childcare? How would he do that?
Yeah. How would he serve your wife, your kids?
How would
all of that.
And that consistently is one of the greatest challenges of making sure that I'm keeping him at the forefront of why we're doing what we're doing, and am I serving others the way Christ would serve others? Because I must continually become less. And that's with my partner, Mark. I told him that same verse a couple of years ago. And I just said, as we talked about naming as the future of our firm and things like that, people are like, don't you want your name on this? I'm like, no, I need to continue to become less so that others and Christ can become greater.
Yeah. I love that section of scripture too. It's such a great segment, that we highlight the 3:30 of that he must increase, we must decrease. But I love the entire scene of that, where it's like you got a time where both Jesus and John the Baptist are baptizing, right? And the line for Jesus to baptize is definitely longer than the line that John the Baptist has. And so John the Baptist, like, his followers come and he's like, man, what's the deal? Everybody's going to Jesus, man. And John's like, well, yeah, listen, that's what this is all about. I must decrease and he must increase, which is so counterculture to what that is so counterculture to our life, or just how our world works, right? I mean, everything that our culture is about self-promotion. It's glorification of self. It's motivation to draw crowds. So that is such a countercultural thought, scripture, to be mindful of on a daily basis.
100%. And that's where also putting the right people around you. I recently had hired Bruce in February, and one of the big things that I told him as my COO was, like, I want you to help lead this firm in the right direction, because I've watched him make bold moves and giving up a career of massive income and things like that to walk away and say, hey, God's calling me somewhere different. You hang around guys like Rich McCurse in this community are serving. You hang around guys like you get to know guys like you get to know guys like Barry Tremont. People are like literally serving for something other than a financial gain or than a measurable goal of glory for themselves. And consistently surrounding your people with people who are of abundance mentality and service-minded to constantly create other experiences. Jordan Montgomery and one of my best friends, Chris Ritter, we talk about this a lot, of like, how are we showing up and how are we serving our team, our employees? How are we serving our clients? And again, Chris is one of my best friends, and he's one of the most humble people I know. And to watch, and you got to consistently put people around you, share this with them, that these are struggles.
That's key,
to help hold you accountable. And I mean, this is why, like, wanting to come on here was making sure that people received the right message of the fact that, hey, we all struggle with these things, and everybody has their struggles, but God's going to use you in a certain specific way, just being obedient to making sure that you don't let your own self-promotion get in the way, especially for a competitive individual like myself.
Yeah, but I love what you said earlier, Ross. You said, that it was how you were driven at the time was very look at me. And in this short amount of time that you and I have been able to spend time together, that it's pretty easy to tell that the focus that you have is look at him and look at what Christ is doing in me and through me, and how do I worship him through every aspect of my life. And I think that's just such a, if that's our motivation, and how do we serve other people in the name of Jesus? How do we love our wives and kids in the same love, with the same passion, with the same pursuing that Jesus loves us and pursues us? When that becomes our motivation, all of a sudden that causes us to walk into our office different. That causes us to really think about, why are we posting what we're posting on social media? Why we're saying what we're saying, all those things. Social media is not a bad thing. We just need to use it correctly. Money is not a bad thing.
Correct.
We just need to use it correctly. Positions of leadership, not a bad thing. We just need to use them effectively. And if that can be our mindset as just people, our businesses will be better, our homes will be better, our community will be better. I mean, so like it's really not a tough concept to understand. It's just a tough concept to live out.
Correct. Ideas are cheap, right? Implementation action is worth the price of gold. And when I think about that, Tom, when I look at the constant thing of like, how am I showing up and serving? I get often asked whether people within our office or whatever is like, hey, you got a lot of energy. And I'm like, I got a lot more energy when I'm focused on adding value or serving others, right? And when I know that we're properly stewarding our time, talent, and treasure in the right way. And so when we think about our wife and our kid, my wife and my kids, creating experiences for them to both emulate the work ethic, but to emulate the service side of things. It's not easy in this demanding kids activities, sports-driven world.
Yeah.
And just there's a lot there, but consistently reminding them of how should they lead. And I'm so proud because they're way better than I ever was, a competitive jerk at their age. And to watch them, I'm just really proud of their heart and where they're at, and consistently coaching from where I came from. I gave my parents a lot of gray hair. My kids give me very little gray hair. I give myself more gray hair. Yeah. But then as you think about how to live that out, it just comes on a daily basis of, I go back to money. It's purely, it means nothing to God. God doesn't need our money. He's got everything that he needs. He needs our heart. He wants our heart to be obedient to him. And stewardship, I think of one of the greatest blessings I've been given is relationships. My business is extremely relationship driven. And I think the number one calling I have is, how am I going to steward those relationships? Not only if I steward those relationships well, we'll end up stewarding their money well. We'll end up stewarding the advice and the direction well, but I must serve those clients and those relationships as best as possible. And that comes also with challenging them, because I think God's given me that relationship and entrusted me in that relationship. And how am I going to steward and challenge them in their heart from a giving perspective? That's a big focus of ours. We have charitable giving conversations, and I invite our clients to our events that we're very involved in all the time, because I think it's extremely important that I'm put in this position of trust, that we emulate that stewardship and encourage them and walk alongside them in it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. So I want to talk about just God as CEO. Okay. So you mentioned it's an initiative of the Kingdom Capital Fund. And it's really about helping people understand just what it is to live out their faith and, be faith forward and everything, the way that they live, the way they conduct their business, all that kind of stuff. So tell me about just God as CEO. Why did you say yes to chairing that? Why is that? And what is having God as our CEO even mean?
Yeah. So, to give credit, Paul Tanakin, great friend, had started this, and he had handed this off and needed a place to land it when he ran for office here in Sioux Falls, and it landed with Kingdom Capital Fund. And Rich McCurris was doing a great job running it, and then it just came time to we needed to build out a committee and really take this thing to what it's capable of, and hopefully empowering and connecting our community together, business leaders, people of influence and leadership, whether they're business owners, they're executives, or running their own just individual business by themselves. How are we communicating that our work is ordained by God? Mm-hmm. And that work is worship. And I think we often think that, hey, Tom's in ministry, and I'm supposed to support Tom, and Tom's in ministry, but I run a financial planning practice. No, I'm in ministry. You're in ministry.
Yeah, we're all in ministry.
We're all in ministry as followers of Christ. And so understanding that work is worship, first and foremost, is that you have a job and a duty, and work was created before the fall of man. When you begin to understand how God will use work as worship. And that's one of the first things. And then it's bold. It's very bold to say God as CEO. When you think God as CEO, that's very bold by definition of hey, God is going to be my CEO. And how Kingdom Capital had said, hey, will you take this on and run with this? Because it's a lot of my journey that I've walked and realized that I was the CEO and I'm in charge, and it's my terms, it's my goals, and understanding that progression. And thankfully, people have hopefully noticed, I think it's what I've been asked in those situations, is there's been a growth trajectory and a progression of just service-minded, hey, this isn't my money. This isn't my business. God has put me in this position. How am I going to use this to lead other people? Mm-hmm. When you think about chief executive officer, ultimately, we better be praying about our businesses on a daily basis. We better be seeking God as our executive officer for that guidance and direction. And that was one of the big reasons bringing Bruce into my business, was to help him lead that initiative within our own firm and our own culture, because I've watched his heart be emulated as a former executive at such an incredible level. I want to emulate those same things within our business. And when it comes to the God as CEO initiative, that's why I recruited, thankfully, an awesome committee of right now, Reggie Kuipers, John Barker, Tony Noor, Brett Vandenbosch, Nate Rickard, Heather Kittleson. I'm probably missing somebody, Tyler Goff. People who have emulated that I've watched emulate them lead a life of, hey, I'm here to serve other people for the kingdom. Mm. And how can we emulate that message of work as worship, first and foremost? Because so many people have a job to maintain a lifestyle, and money in that job end up being ultimately controlling them. Mm. And trying to reverse the script that it's God, us, and then the earth and the worldly corporate cultures that we live in and everything else, that we should be stewarding those things. Oftentimes, I think the world's reversed, right? And our careers control us. Mm-hmm. And so how do we flip that script? How do we communicate that? And then let's just promote all of the business leaders in our community and beyond with what are they doing in their business? Mm-hmm. And we want to hear their stories.
Which is great because we learn. I mean, we learn by journeying with other people.
Correct.
And I mean, when you first became a dad, I mean, you had no clue what you were doing, right? I mean, right. You're drawn upon okay, well, I think my dad did this, or hey, my parents did this, and I mean, I turned out okay, right. But no, we're asking for other people's input as hey, what's worked for you? What are you doing? And we're gleaning that wisdom, so it only makes sense that we're having these important conversations that sometimes we leave for, church, or that because we tend to segment our lives at times, and this is what it's now we're trying to say, no, this is supposed to infiltrate every aspect of our life so that we can go and truly view our work as worship. We're not worshiping our work, but we're viewing our work as worship and an opportunity to be in ministry for the Lord.
100%. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Now, it's an initiative and it's an idea. And we've been, for the past year and a half, laying the groundwork of what does that mean. So we rolled out with our monthly Zoom sessions and then, focused on hosting a couple key events in the spring and fall, and then providing additional follow-up content because there's a lot of people at all different stages that attend our events or hear, whether it's this podcast or hear other ones. How do we take people from, maybe an infant stage or a very mature stage? How do we take that person from infant to mature, and how do we take somebody in their faith and somebody who's mature to maybe take it to another level of like encouraging others, right? Somebody that may be more infant in their faith walk or in their journey of seeking and pursuing God with their business may not be as bold enough to want to go like, hey, let's go get a bunch of guys together to really drive this initiative. And so as we mature throughout that, that's the vision of God as CEO is really, I hope, we're sitting here 5 and 10 years from now because the organization is not me. It's an idea, an initiative to glorify the kingdom through the idea of what does this mean to have our work as worship. And I hope we're sitting here 5 years from now and we've heard from, hundreds of people within our community who are like, hey, I want to learn more. How can I grow more and lead my business differently? When Paul Tanakin founded this, he had a bold scripture message on his wall at Click Rain. And that was the thing is like, hey, we're not going to be shy about our faith. We're also going to love everybody. Right? And so there's two different things. It's like not thumping people over the head of the Bible. Like you come into my company, this is what you're going to do. One, this is who we are.
Right.
But then this is how we're going to lead and love you.
Yeah. And these are the principles in which we're going to run our business. This is how you're going to see us, like how we're going to be treating people, whether they be our customers, our clients, but also one another.
Correct.
And within the walls of our business. That's what I love about, like we have, the quintessential one that everyone always talks about is, Chick-fil-A and all this and and how they treat people and the ability that they have had and just saying like, look, we're going to create an environment that's going to be life-giving to people. And then we're going to hopefully serve some good chicken as well. Pizza Ranch here locally is another great example. It says that right in their mission statement, it has nothing to do with pizza. It has to do about creating a spirit-filled environment for their employees to work. And you see that, and it's not a formula. It's not like saying, hey, if we just put Jesus in our mission statement, that's guaranteeing our business to be success. No, it's not a formula, but it is what God desires for us as believers. And that's just our job, just to follow what he's calling us to do.
Yeah. Try to create the culture and the environment, whether it be with your team meetings, whether it be with the organizations you're serving, as a community, are we displaying that with how, our team, our business is serving the community? And that's where, God as CEO, Nicole on my team and Bruce, like they're very involved in the God as CEO initiative and helping organize. And I get our team, we always offer to them, we don't mandate it, offer them to volunteer. And so they're going to volunteer registration and help coordinate the events. Same thing with Compassion Childcare. And multiple team members, willing to step up and serve. Now, those are ministries that, my wife and I are passionate about, but thankfully they've come along and said, hey, we like this and we want to give that opportunity to show what service means. And then bringing it back to our team meetings, every Monday, starting with our team meeting. We're going through a book right now with John Wooden, his Pyramid of Success, and it's all scripture-based. And opening every Monday with prayer. And everybody on our team and employees, they're at different walks and different stages of their walk. But we're not going to shy away from it. We're just not going to, it's not my job to sit here and hammer them. I need to be life. I need to be light. I need to be salt. And so creating that environment, it's not easy. It's hard and sometimes really challenging. But how are we doing that throughout our core values? How are we doing that throughout the opportunities we're presenting to our team? And how are we doing that with our benefits, our compensation? Are we displaying abundance? Are we displaying generosity? Are we, charitable giving matches, things like that? Are we displaying, I'm going to say, Christ-like examples.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It's not perfect at all. And there is no formula.
Yeah, right. And I think that, maybe someone's listening and they're saying, okay, so I'm not a part of a company like that, or I am leading a company and I need to get, I need to, aspire to try to, be that kind of company. I think that, one of the first things is that regardless of where you're at in leadership, it really starts with you as an individual first, and just saying, okay, am I going to live my life in that fashion first? I mean, before we can ever say, hey, we're going to blow this out company-wide or, change the entire culture, it first begins with you first, and just saying, am I seeking to model Christ-like living behaviors, attitudes, both in the workplace, but then also at home? And I think that's one of the things that Ross, that I thought was really neat about our conversation, and meaningful about our conversation that we had at lunch, was when you said, when that mentor of mine, who I had a high level of respect for, he had the courage to come and say some very difficult words for me to hear. You obviously, he'd earned the right to be heard, but you could have easily said, well, you're wrong. That's not who I am, or whatever, right? But instead, you received that, felt the sting, and then you had to go home and you had to have a conversation with your wife. And you had to say 2 words that that men sometimes struggle in saying, and that's, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I own the arrogant, prideful individual I've been, and realizing that I look back, and it was just like constantly making, it's my agenda, my goals, my time, and don't get me wrong, it's not like it's removed. But it's a journey of always remembering where we were at, and am I consistently pointing the glory, the direction to the right direction, which is Christ. Am I pointing those things the right way?
So how do you not place? Because sometimes we can place so much pressure on ourselves, right? Well, we got to be perfect. I struggle with perfectionism, man. I mean, that's a huge thing I struggle with. And so and sometimes we can put so much pressure on ourselves to do everything right, to always deflect, any kind of glory. And we all need to be told, hey, we need attaboys. We need to be told we're doing a good job and all that kind of stuff too. But so how do you keep from just putting so much pressure on yourself to do everything right?
And I'm not saying I never removed it. The pressure, more than anything, going back to who we're surrounding ourselves with. I've often been told long time ago, Rob Roy and him and I had breakfast at Perkins years and years ago, well before I was on Kingdom Capital Board, and he just said, Ross, there are average people talk about people. Good people talk about events. Great people talk about ideas. When you apply the Christian faith to it, great people talk about Christian-minded ideas of serving people. And then another one is, understanding, Jordan tells me this, is we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. So it talks about that pressure. Removing that pressure, to me, is creating the culture. With where you're spending your time. I love golf. I only golf 5 times a year, maybe, and some scrambles. I'm not going to make it a priority, because my family, my firm, and our service to the community are more important to me than some of my other things. Now, I do have my own selfish hobbies of hunting, but I also, at the same time, on our property, I love to invite youth and friends' kids and clients' kids, and taking them to experience something they otherwise probably wouldn't get a chance to. How am I using that to serve others? But again, putting 2 really good buddies around me, and Brett Van den Bosch and Dave, who helped me on the property, they're accountability partners.
Yeah.
And so when you do it with a group of people, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life, I got Mark, who has accomplished more than I think I'll ever accomplish as a partner, and he's the most humble guy in our business that I know. And so, hey, if he's going to be humble, well, I better check my ego at the door, right? And so constantly creating that culture of abundance and humility with who you're spending time with and where you're spending your time. I think is one of the easiest ways to decrease that pressure, because it just becomes easier to execute on your mission of what you want to accomplish when you create the right culture and the right environment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to end our time here and just talking about just some simple ways, just simple things. A lot of times, we sometimes make things a little too hard, harder than they need to be, right?
Overcomplicate them all the time.
Exactly. We overthink stuff and we overcomplicate stuff. So what are just some simple things? So someone's listening to this and they're saying, okay, this whole God is CEO thing sounds like a good idea. Sounds like something that I want to implement. I really want to live out my faith a little bit more at work or in the community. Are there some simple things that you would just encourage guys or others that are listening hey, this is maybe a couple things to just try or to do?
I'd say the first thing I think is foundational is having a really good church home. And Pastor Wheeler, our pastor, Central, he is outstanding. And having a pastor and a mentor who you also can lean into is really important because there's nobody that speaks better scriptural truth than a guy like him. And so, one, I think just the simple things is evaluating yourself on who you're taking advice from, first and foremost. I think that's just a big thing on where are you getting, we can take the parable of the talents that is often misunderstood and taken out of context all of the time. So are we getting good scriptural truth? And so I would seek people who are sound scriptural servants of the kingdom first and foremost to give you input, wisdom, feedback.
Yeah, we got to be filled up. If we're gonna pour out, we got to be filled up. Yeah. So great first. That's great foundational first step for sure.
I mean, the church home and a pastor and some really good sound scriptural people around you is something that I think is just really important to me because again, you're average of where you spend your time. And the second thing, one is if you're married, having these conversations with your spouse. I don't travel without my spouse if I can help it. For business reasons, whatever it may be. I want to do life together. I don't want to run my business and then have a family. I want to be a family man that runs a business. And so when we're trying to accomplish this vision of these more kingdom-focused goals, making sure that my wife and I are aligned in that. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, that takes intentionality.
Yeah. Very much so. I mean, you guys do this with all your date night comedies and creating, that environment, but making sure that, Crystal's my biggest cheerleader, hands down, and she sees what our focus is. And so I think that's another thing. Like as husbands, we fall short all the time in being great communicators to our spouse. I may be the best communicator to my team or my clients, and man, I can just shortchange it sometimes with my wife, making sure that, hey, these are things that matter to us, and I want to take these steps. And so I think sound scriptural people, and then if you are married, I think a sound relationship, making sure that the goal that you're trying to pursue of growth in this area of leadership is a mutual partnership so that they're going to walk with you. And so Crystal is very involved in all of the things we're doing, and she's always encouraging, promoting. Yesterday my wife and kids are at CJ's camp helping serve. They were out at Compassion Childcare all day. And every Thursday she's there. And so making sure that you got a team that you're going to do it with, I think is really important. Or if it's like, hey, Tom, being vulnerable. And vulnerability is a buzzword today, but I think it's extremely important to find those, few key people in your life to be really vulnerable that can give you feedback. Because while we're going to try to change the world, oftentimes we're being changed. And I think it's important to know who we're being changed into. If it's led by sound scriptural, it's led by a solid foundation with your home and that your family and your wife are on board with, and you guys are in alignment, then we can go into the workplace more confidently, knowing, hey, I got these things. I got a really good church home. I got a great foundation with my wife and my kids. And then we can go out there. Because I wouldn't want to go, as Wheeler said, when we talk about marriage advice, he's like, Ross, if you got back to your office after this lunch we're having, and you found out there's a problem with a client, what would you do? You'd go fix it. And I'll never forget that. He's like, you'd go fix it. So if there's a problem in your home, you got to go fix that first. And so those foundational, two things, church, home, and family, need to be really rooted before you then focus on the business.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that, thankfully, my wife is listening. We talk about this, and I talked to her about whether or not this is the right thing to do. So we need to be unified in our mission field together of what we're doing on a daily basis. And so I think that's just another application thing.
Yeah.
I think is critical. And then just that vulnerability with a couple key people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I mean, because it's funny that you talk about how we can really be poor communicators with our spouses. I mean, we really can. And Laura always used to say, if I want to know what's going on in your life, I just have to listen to one of your conversations that you have with your buddies on the phone, or whatever. And I'm like, that's not a really good thing for me to have to, because I'm like, I need to do a better job of like involving her in different aspects. Because the reality is that a lot of times, our spouses will say, at the end of the day, hey, how was your day? Fine. How was your day? Fine. And there's that real communication doesn't happen. Ted Cunningham always talks about the how to have the daily delay, 15 minutes, even if it's just a short window of time, 15 minutes of face-to-face, a conversation with one another and connecting with each other. Because especially, having young kids like you do, it's sometimes ships in the night. I mean, because it's busy. Yeah, stuff. So you have to be intentional about that. And so I really applaud your intentionality in having those meaningful conversations with Crystal. I love that you said that we got to make sure that we're doing all we can to lead our homes, mm-hmm. and living out our faith at home. And then that it's the natural outflow then is into our work, because there has to be that connection. And then the one thing that I would add to that, which that's such great content. Thank you for that. Is that those times with the Lord, even prior to stepping into each day of work. And I know you do this. I was just saying, okay, God, man, I need you to lead me today. You said that. I was just like, man, I want to be used by you today. Make me aware of needs. Make me open to maybe movements that you are doing throughout the day that maybe I may miss if I'm just so focused on me or what I need to do. Because that's how the culture changes, right? When we enter into whatever our office is or whatever meeting it is, and we say, God, would you use me mm-hmm. in ways that only you can today? That's culture changing stuff.
And the devil is going to work extremely hard.
Oh yeah.
He's going to constantly give you an opportunity to fall short. And so whether it be with, my kids, my wife, we're not perfect, and that it's hard, but hard things are worth doing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this roller coaster of understanding that we're going to be strong and consistent through the peaks and the valleys, and coming back to, hey, why are we here on this earth, and why am I supposed to serve them? And what are we doing on a daily basis? My grandpa, Reitsma, was a foundational, just the elder in the church and the guy that everybody loved. And he was just a very outgoing individual. And when he passed away, we're going through his stuff, and there was this daily prayer book that, as a reminder of my heritage and my faith and how abundant my grandpa was, everybody loved him. I leave it sit right on my desk, and it sits right in front of my computer to give me that daily prayer reminder every single day of like, hey, I got to begin my day just praying. My daughter, she's 14, she thinks I'm really boring in the car because I listen to podcasts or I don't have the radio on.
Yeah.
And she's like, Dad, like, I think you hate music. And I'm like, no, I love music, but I also love silence in certain areas.
Yeah.
But I also, when people ask, what are you doing to grow? I think it's, finding those 3 to 5 podcasts you're plugging into in your gaps.
Yeah.
Whether you're driving, whether you're, doing something. I love working on my farm property. Whether it's those moments of just being in tune with listening to how God's going to use Tom Henderson to speak to me, I think are really, really important along the way. Because the devil, we got to constantly be feeding ourselves living water, because the devil constantly wants to give us toxic water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard. And we are all men of sin, right? And if you look around the world, I mean, in the media, majority of the problems are caused by men, it seems. You observe it, and it's because we are typically not good communicators. Or two, we seem very emotional, driven, tempted. We tend to be, women have a plate of spaghetti in their brain, and we have a bunch of boxes in our brain, and we tend to totally be focused here and forget what's going on over here. Whereas my wife, she can I don't know how she does this today. I'm like, how do you go serve with compassion at the same time you remember our kids' schedule like the back, and at the same time you're going to show up for our team, and you're just always forward ahead. Whereas I'm like, man, give me these 3 projects I got, and that's it, right? And I think that just comes to, one, being obedient in your faith walk of who you're surrounding yourself with, what you're doing on a daily basis, the content you're feeding yourself with.
Yeah,
I think it's just critical. And I've noticed where I've fallen short is when I'm out of line with my daily devotions, and I'm out of line with those communications either with my spouse or my vulnerability buddies of hey, here's what I'm really struggling with. And we got to be just consistent, create the culture on a daily basis to make that happen.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, and praise God for the grace that God gives us continually, right? And the grace of our spouses and our kids when we do mess up, and our team members, because again, perfection is unattainable. But we want to continue to just strive for our conformity to Christ. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, that's one of the goals of the podcast is really to help dudes just be thinking about just how am I daily, becoming more and more like Jesus. I mean, that's what RESGEN's about, is helping men in their conformity to Christ. And that's what we've been talking about here, is just we want to be Jesus as close as we can to being Jesus in our workplace, in our homes. And so this has been so good. Well, bro, we end our each episode with something we call the final word. Okay, so it's just kind of 30, 60 seconds. It could be something that you just want to revisit real quick, or just something new that the Holy Spirit gives you. But just kind of it's a final word that you leave listeners with. Maybe it's a scripture that God's just really had you focused on lately. Whatever. So you got a final word for us?
I'm just going to leave you with what we talked about earlier, John 3:30.
Yeah. And
I believe that, if we focus on becoming less and focus on Him becoming greater, that becomes a very simple statement to remind ourselves of why am I doing what I'm doing right now? When I think about that, am I serving Kingdom Capital well, or am I doing it for myself? Am I serving compassion, or am I doing it for myself? Am I serving my clients, or am I doing it for myself? Constantly being reminded that it needs to be a kingdom focus. And then the additional aspect of that is understanding what grace means. And that the guy over here who's fallen short, I'm as flawed as him because I've fallen short so many times. And so learning how to, as a Christian, understand that if we focus on Christ and becoming greater in our life, and we're going to be less concerned about what's in it for me, we're going to likely be a lot more grace-filled and abundant-filled with how we lead to those that do fall short. Whether it's a guy that's had an affair, whether it's a guy that, just has some other vices in their life. I think of that as I used to look at my life and think I was up here because I grew up in the faith and I know better than I realize, understand. You watch people go through man, I'm as flawed and broken and screwed up in just different ways. And how would Christ respond to that? And I think of the woman with the well, am I responding to that same way? And when I make it about Him, when I focus less on me and I focus more on just, am I doing this for the right reasons? So He can become greater, I respond more in love and grace.
Yeah.
And that comes to just our politics, all these things that are out there today.
Yeah.
I think this is just my final word.
Yeah.
Just focusing on John 3:30.
That's so good. That's so good. We receive grace and we need to give grace. That's a great final word as well. So Russ, thank you. Thanks for your time here today. This has been a meaningful conversation for me to have with you. And I know that listeners will find it to be that for them as well. So really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate just being able to spend time, get to know you, and just watch the growth of RESGEN and the ministry. I mean, you guys do just an excellent job. And it's just, again, getting to know men of faith who are seeking out to live their calling. Saying, hey, God's put me here. And you think about your story. I mean, everybody's got a story. And are we living it out in obedience? And just to watch you do that and have the fearlessness of like, hey, Ross, I don't know you super well. I want you to come and tell some of what we shared.
Yeah.
I'm like, this guy's crazy.
Yeah.
And yet I'm like, okay, I prayed for it. I actually was 2 weeks ago, when I texted you back the next day, I was sitting with CJ Ham, and him and I were having this conversation. I said to CJ, I said, hey, Tom really wants me to do this. And I said, I just don't want to make it about me. And I really wrestled with it and prayed about it. And we just had this really good dialogue around this. And I'm like, man, here's a guy who's, in the NFL, and he's consistently feeding me with scripture. And he's like, if you pray obediently and you still feel like there's a reason that you and Tom got connected this past year, I think it's maybe just God asking to share your story.
Yeah.
And be real and be vulnerable.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for being vulnerable, bro. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening in on my conversation with Ross Reitsma today. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, feel free to share it with others that may find it helpful as well. If you'd like to connect more with Ross, you can do so on LinkedIn. Thanks again for joining me today, everybody, and we'll see you next time for episode 65 of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.